Welcome, Uncommon. Welcome back to one of our interviews. I'm here today with a longtime friend, James Metsger from Christ Point Church. James, thank you for taking some time out for us today.
TJ, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be with you. Greetings to your people.
Greetings. You guys are going to enjoy this today. James is awesome on video, and so I'm looking forward to this interview. James has been active with, me and our studio for a long time, but also with Uncommon in different aspects. And so this is his debut on our interview section. So we sent out some questions to our interviewers a long time ago. And so this one I passed by James this week, and it's usually around the role of husband, dad, and leader. And so today's first question is, did you have a good role model growing up?
Yeah, I think it's funny you asked that question, and I was trying to think in my mind, like, who comes to mind? Was there a dude in my life that I was looking to where I said, I want to be him, or I want to follow in his footsteps? And the more I thought about it, I thought, I think there's probably a few guys that I looked at where there was just certain aspects of their life that I admired. Like, there wasn't one guy I looked at and I was like, I think he's the perfect dad and husband and leader. And but there was just aspects of people's life where I was like, man, that's cool. I would like to learn more about that, or I would like to follow in his footsteps. So I look at my own father, and it's funny, as you get older, you see strengths and weaknesses. But I looked at my dad and how he cared for my mom. My mom, really her whole life has battled some health issues, and my dad's just a faithful guy.
Wow.
And he has been my whole life. And so I think even growing up, I would hear stories of like other dudes who maybe would tap out, or who would drift away from their families, or who would kind of go, man, I didn't sign up for this. I'm out. And I saw a certain faithfulness in my dad, and I really admired that in him. I looked at someone like my step grandfather, who was a Christian educator and a pastor for a handful of years. And I think back to conversations that we had growing up. And I think, like, theologically, or just my picture of who God is, has been greatly influenced by his life. I'm grateful for his example. I look at another guy like my uncle, who was also bald like me and handsome, and he just he was a guy that I looked to and thought, man, he's a hard worker. I just kind of watched how he operated, how he cared for his family and for his house. And I know that sounds silly, but like I looked at his example and I thought, man, that's cool. Like I want to reflect that, or kind of be like that when I grow up. And so I don't know if I've ever looked at one dude and thought to myself, man, he's like the total package. I want to be like him when I grow up. But I see aspects of certain people and go, man, I love that. Like I long for that. And I think there's a reason for that, right? We're broken people. None of us are perfect. And the closer you get to us, the more you see the blemishes. And so we're all kind of a mixed bag. And so there's things about us that I think other people look at and go, man, that's really great. That's cool. That's God honoring. And then there's other things probably about us that people, if they were to know, go, I don't know if I want to follow in his footsteps. So for me, it was just a handful of dudes that I think for various reasons influenced me or impacted me growing up.
I'm a gleaner by nature. I'm going to look at someone and try to identify those traits that make up a role model, but also, I coined the phrase years ago, anti-role model. And so, our dads grew up in a generation that may have not really spent a whole lot of time working on themselves, being a dad or a husband or a leader. And so for me, I learned just as much, if not more, of what not to do for my dad or my uncles or adults around me, as I did for the things that were, worthy of being a role model trait. Because I mean, my dad was very, very hardworking, even until recently, until his health really kind of started giving problems. Very, very hardworking. And so, like you said, as you grow older, hopefully with maturity, you can look at someone and not just focus on the anti-role model parts. You can kind of appreciate the role model traits, but also learn from the anti-role model traits as well. I learned a lot about being a dad from anti-role model traits. So I'm like, I don't want to do that, and I'm not going to do this. And so, I think everybody has, like you said, everybody is broken, and the reason why you cannot find that one guy to be a role model is because Christ is our role model. So we're always going to show up with, like you said, cracks, right? The closer you get, the more you see them. And so, but it is good to hear guys talk about what they had growing up, because no one has the perfect dad or uncle or adult in our life growing up. But the sooner you can realize that, as long as when you return to Christ, then you do have a role model that is sufficient in every way. And so it's just great to hear people answer that question, because so far it's never been like, oh man, everything about my dad was 100% perfect. No, he's flawed as well.
Yeah, it's a good word.
Yeah. So the next thing is there anything that you do specifically to, like, habits, practices, learning yourself, how you approach being a husband, dad, or leader?
I mean, I have a long philosophical answer to that, and then there's probably a shorter one in there somewhere.
Oh, sorry.
How long do you want this to be, TJ? No, I mean, I think our philosophy of parenting, of being, a dad, being a husband, being a leader, even though we may not think about it a ton or write it down on paper, I think that ultimately drives us, right? So when you start talking about just the real practical component to parenting or to being a husband or to being a leader, I think all of that flows out of our philosophy, spoken or unspoken. And so, when you had sent me that question, TJ, I started thinking, like, what are the truths that drive me as a dad, as a husband, as a leader, and then I think out of that kind of flows the practical piece. And so when I was thinking about that, I thought, just what you said a minute ago, is that I remind myself that there was one perfect dad, there was one perfect husband, there was one perfect leader, and I'm not it, right? Yeah. Like I'm not that. So Jesus was that guy. And so what that does is it sets me free, and on one hand, to go, I'm not going to do this perfectly.
Sure.
I'm not going to do it perfectly. And there's some freedom there, right? Because there's grace that I can extend to to myself and to others. And so I start there, and then I approach being a dad, being a husband, being a leader as someone who is dependent and someone who is weak in and of myself, right? So I'm dependent upon Christ. I'm dependent upon the Spirit to help enable me to be something that I'm not naturally on my own. Right? And I know that we celebrate strength. I mean, dudes celebrate strength over weakness. At our church the other week, we had lunch after the service, like with all the families gathered together, and then we currently meet in a high school, so we went to the gym to play dodgeball. And there's this one dude who he's been coming to the church for a while. I don't know him super well, but he gets out on the basketball court and picks up a dodgeball. And there's, I don't know, there's like 50 of us, 60 of us, a bunch of little kids all over and some adults. And this guy like picks up this ball, and I swear it was like I'm gonna date myself, but it was like Randy Johnson like showed up for dodgeball. He's like, I don't know if he clocked triple digits, but it was close. And like kids are diving everywhere, grown men are hiding because they don't want to get hit. I just looked at him. I'm like, I told him, I sent him an email today, and I'm like, I have a man crush on your right arm, like because like it was strong. Like, celebrate strength. I mean, there's people that we look to and go, man, he is a strong dude. Like he has got it together. And yet I think in the Christian life, weakness is the way. Like we don't approach God in our strength. We approach him in our weakness. Yeah. And I think that's true in our parenting. I think it's true of us as husbands. I think it's true of us as leaders, right? And so I'm not perfect. Only God is. I'm dependent. And I'm weak. And so I kind of approach those areas of my life believing that. But on the same token, I believe that God changes us, right? He changes people. He's in the business of changing our trajectory, of altering who we are, ultimately into the image of Jesus. And so I'm going, okay, I'm not in and of myself awesome. I'm not going to win any awards for being father of the year, or husband of the year, or leader of the year in my own strength. I'm dependent. I'm weak, but God's changing me, and so I'm learning. I'm growing, and so I honestly, truly believe that. Philosophically, I also believe that before we even talk about what it looks like to practically be a good dad, or a good husband, or a good leader, we need to know that who we are as individuals ultimately flow from our hearts. It flows out of our hearts. We don't like white knuckle our way into being good dads or good husbands or good leaders. How I treat my wife, how I treat my 3 kids. I have a 14-year-old, a 12, soon to be 12-year-old, and a 7-year-old little girl. She's my favorite. I love you, Amelia. You're the best.
She's already 7. Oh my goodness.
I know, it's crazy, dude. She's the best. I'm looking at building a tower and putting her in it until she's like 35. That's neither here nor there. But I just think the way that I interact with my wife, the way that I interact with my kids, the way I lead at church flows from my heart. It flows from who I am or who I'm becoming. And so there's this part of me where I'm going, God, like help me to guard my heart, help soften my heart, humble my heart. Because I know from that place, that's what's going to impact my parenting. That's what's going to influence me as a husband. That's what's going to grow me as a leader, right? So Proverbs talks about this idea of guarding our hearts. It's the wellspring. Our hearts are the wellspring of life. And so I'm going, all right, Lord, like help me, give me a picture for what that looks like. All right, so. I mean, that's philosophy. That's kind of what drives me as a dad, as a husband, as a pastor. And then you start going, okay, well, that's cool, but that seems like kind of the view from 30,000 feet. And you're going, what does that look like when you live it out on a daily basis? And so, I mean, hopefully that stuff is flowing out in practical stuff. With my wife, I'm going, I want to nourish and cherish her. I want to serve her. I want to know when I come home at the end of the day, regardless of how tired I am, her day was probably harder than my day, right? And so I'm coming home and I'm going, all right, Lord, help me to be engaged, help me to be present, help me not to be apathetic or to pull back, because I have a natural bent toward that. Like I get home and I mean, there's this part of me that goes, man, I really would like my slippers and,
where's my robe?
Sports center, bring me the fatted calf, something to drink. I just have a natural bent toward that. And so I'm going, okay, I know that. And I don't want that. Like, ultimately, that's not a good story to tell. It's not, like when I look out to the end of my life and go, what do I want said about me? I don't want my wife to go, James really knew how to do nothing when he got home. I mean, he nailed nothing. Like, that's not cool.
Right.
So, and
at nothing. The Seinfeld of husbands.
right. He was the Seinfeld of dads. Like, that's not cool. Or husbands. And so just practically, I'm having conversations with my wife, and I'm asking her, like, do you feel loved? What am I not doing that I need to be doing? Just being open and honest about those conversations. And what I've found is that, like, she's kind enough to actually speak the truth to me. And so sometimes she'll tell me things that I don't want to hear, or if I start to have an unrealistic view of who I am as a husband, she'll bring me down to earth. I read one time, one of my favorite authors, Paul David Tripp, was telling a story about when he was having an argument with his wife, Luella, and he said, in this kind of the heat of the moment, he was a pastor at the time, and he's like, Luella, 95% of the women at the church would love to be married to me.
Oh.
And she said, well, I'm not one of them. And so like wives are good at speaking truth and keeping us humble. And so just keeping a pulse on Melissa's heart and allowing her to speak truth into my life. And I say that, and she would probably also be quick to tell you, I'm not always great at receiving that, right? I like to put on my lawyer hat and defend myself, and that's not healthy. And so I say that I invite feedback, but I know that I don't always do it well. But yeah, I want to serve her, huh?
Yeah, have you ever seen, because this is the second time I've heard this exact point this week. So, and I've been doing Right Now Media, we've been doing Matt Chandler's Mingling of the Souls.
Oh, yeah.
And we're at the lovey-dovey session. Mm-hmm. And this was the exact thing he talked about. He's like, I go to my wife and I ask her, what could I be doing better? What am I not getting right? And before he go ask that question, he's got to prepare his heart, right? Yeah. Because truth is about to be uttered that you may not be open to.
Right.
And it is interesting to hear that, because I imagine some guys, would be, yeah, I got it together. Bring it on. What do you got? And she's like, I think you're kind of lazy when it comes to the kids. Oh my goodness. So it's interesting to hear that, you do that. And then also that, as men, ego and pride, you don't like to hear the truth.
Yeah.
And so have you guys ever done any, I don't know, not marriage counseling, but marriage studies that kind of got you to that point where you felt, hey, we're going to have this kind of dialogue about maybe my performance as a husband, dad, and leader, because I need to hear that sometimes, and maybe even you giving it to her as well. Have you had that, any kind of training toward that?
Yeah. Yeah, I was laughing when you're talking about kind of exposing yourself to feedback and then preparing your heart for it. I thought of the great theologian Mike Tyson once said that everyone's got a plan until they get punched.
Bingo. Right.
And it can feel like that, a little bit. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched. And so you're like, oh, this is a great idea. Like, I'm going to ask my wife how I'm doing. And then it's like, wham. I didn't see that coming. So you talked about like helpful, studies or materials or, counseling. I'm kind of, I tell people at the church all the time, I'm kind of a guy that believes in like throwing the kitchen sink at an issue or a challenge. And so I would like all of those things that you mentioned, whether it's counseling, sitting down with a counselor, whether it's walking through, marriage material, whether it's just a faithfulness in, attending a local church, like all of those things. I just read a study this week that just talked about the benefit of of being at a local church body on a regular basis. Just the positive impact that has on a family. And we hear that and we go, that, I don't want to be a legalist. But even that, so it's like almost like start there,
Sure.
like come to a local church body, commit yourself to a local congregation of believers. Practically, some resources that have been beneficial for me and for our marriage. Two Becoming One, book by Don and Sally Meredith. They were actually part of launching our church, what it was, 12 years ago now. That book has been really influential for us. Just talking about faith-based marriage. What does that look like? Faith-based, not performance-based. It was huge for us. Was really instrumental. We attended a Weekend to Remember through Family Life years ago. Like when we were probably maybe 15 years ago. We had been married for a couple of years, and it was significant for us. I mean, I think we look back upon that time. It's 3 days. It's Friday nights and all day Saturday. It's a half day Sunday. We just had conversations as a fairly newly married couple that we hadn't had before. I think it opened conversation for us. It was hard, and we had some difficult, conversations during that time.
Right.
But I think it helped set our direction, some. So yeah, Two Becoming One, great resource, great marriage resource. Weekend to Remember was a great investment in our marriage. Counseling for people. I have a kind of a personal health plan that I try to live out. I actually see a counselor, once a month. I don't typically advertise it because sometimes people start looking at you cross-eyed, but I'm really passionate about doing things that are healthy for my own soul. And that's one of the things that's healthy for my soul. And I know that, it kind of goes back to this idea we talked about earlier about, guarding your heart or tending to your own heart. And I just as a dude, if I'm not healthy spiritually, physically, emotionally, that impacts the people around me. It impacts my wife. It impacts my kids. It impacts the church. And so I want to address soul issues that I have before I go out and try to fix everyone else. So those things I would say are beneficial. Two Becoming One was a great resource for me. And Tim Keller's got a great book on marriage, that Meaning of Marriage. It's a great resource. There's a ton of stuff out there. What Did You Expect is another book that just talks about our own brokenness that we bring into our marriage, in our marriages. But Weekend to Remember is something that was beneficial and a great investment in our marriage. Counseling, and then just we talked earlier about the benefit of just the body of Christ, like coming alongside other couples and seeing them interact with one another, seeing their relationships, learning from them, both good and bad. Hearing people tell stories where you're going, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that thought that or has wrestled with that. That's been incredibly beneficial for me. So yeah, all of the above.
Right on. It's funny that we get emails from people, and you would think that, so your example of doing that Weekend to Remember when you've been together for a couple of years, you would think, okay, well, maybe in the beginning I need the most help because we're transitioning from single to married, living together. It's crazy. How do you deal with that? We get emails from, I've been married 35, 45. One was 50 plus years, and he got separated recently, came back together, and he was asking, how do I build that trust again? You can see that this is not a one and done piece. This is a plate spinning exercise that Dana and I think have a great marriage because we're constantly working on it. We never stop. We've probably done 15 to 20 marriage studies. We've been married almost 30 years.
Yeah. And
it requires work. It's not a one-time investment of whatever that weekend was, and then I got it.
Well, it's funny, TJ. Dana actually told me recently that you do require a lot of work.
She's correct. She's correct. What's funny is that you mentioned about, so in my head, I'm thinking, because we all work together, and so you can see that my wife, she works right there. And so what's funny is she's like a machine when it comes to like just doing what she's supposed to be doing, right? And so I'm bent toward, after I just like pour myself out into whatever I'm working on for the day, I do like to go just sit on the sofa and for like 15, 20 minutes and just, that means like 30.
Yeah.
And just like, okay, I'm just going to do nothing, get in my nothing box, right? And then she comes out and she's like, all right, I'm start getting dinner going. She works out every day religiously. Like, you don't have to say, Dana, it's time to work out. Me, you got to pull me like a come along from this chair into the living room to do workout stuff. But it's inspirational to have a partner that, is strong where you're weak and you're strong where she's weak. Maybe.
Yeah.
So,
well, I love what you said too, TJ, about the necessity to continue to grow and invest in your marriage.
Yes.
There's an old joke from The Simpsons. From The Simpsons, when Homer Simpson said, "Yeah, like I told you I loved you the day we got married. If it ever changes, I'll let you know." And I think sometimes it's easy for us to kind of have that mindset where we're like, "Oh no, like what? I chased after my wife before we got married. Like that's the pursuit is done." Or I told her that I loved her, on our wedding day. And so, and if you're not careful, you start to get a little lethargic or lazy, or you just think, hey, we've been doing this for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. It kind of is what it is. But man, it takes constant and continual work and investment and sharpening. It's kind of, it's funny, even as you were talking about that, I was thinking about the difference between an old and a new car, and how when you get a new car, it seems like everything works well and nothing breaks down. But you realize with time, you need to take care of it. You need to invest in it. You need to look under the hood. And marriages are the same way. It's not just because you've been married a long time doesn't mean you have a healthy marriage. It just means that you've been married a long time.
Right, that you are going to stick with this, whether it is good or bad, and because you can look at that number and say, wow, it's 40 plus years. That's fantastic. I know several long marriages that are absolutely horrible, train wrecks, but they have a really high marriage number. And I'm like, well, it's based off of more than longevity, that health. I mean, I'm 50 years old. Just because I'm 50 doesn't mean I know, right? Just because I'm 50 doesn't mean that I'm in the best health out in my whole life. And so my marriage is the same way. It needs constant work. So, it's weird to call it work. We do enjoy spending time working on that, but I would highly recommend, if you guys get a chance to watch it, The Mingling of the Souls. That channel is very, very good. It's about 14 sessions, half hour a piece, and there's been several sessions that we'll just pause and look at each other and go, "Oh my goodness, that's us." 30 years into it, that's us. So
I'll check it out.
So the last question I have is, and you may have discussed some of it already, but are you part of any men's ministries that you find really kind of, or as a springboard to you in your walk?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's certainly stuff at the church that we do. Everything flows through our vision, which is to point people to Jesus. And so we want our guys to experience a relationship with Christ. And so what that means for us is that there's times where we're sitting down with the Word and opening the Word. It's kind of a mirror to our souls. It shows us what sometimes we don't see or don't want to see. It's funny. I think of Scripture as we have one of those mirrors in our bathroom now that it just magnifies everything like 1,000 times. And so there's times when I look in there and I see things that I had never seen before. like you, I'm starting to inch up a little bit in age. And so the running joke in my house is that Melissa will come over to me and she's like, "Oh, James, you got a little something." "Oh, it's attached. It's attached." And I'm like, I didn't see it. I didn't know that hair was there. And so, right. So I look in the mirror and it shows me things that I didn't see before. The word's like that. The word shows us things that we didn't see before. And so we want, as dudes, we all have blind spots, but we don't want to operate, oblivious to those. And so point guys to the word. We want significant relationships. We want, biblical community with one another. And so we spend time together. Like for me, what that looks like more often than not is a few guys more so than the many. Yeah. I think when just how God has kind of wired me, when I find myself in a room with, 30, 40 guys, I can get a little squirmy. And I would much rather do this. I would much rather sit across the table and eat Thai food with you sometimes than,
Amen.
Than to work a crowd. But we should actually do the Thai food thing. We're
yes. We can do Thai food. We can do. We're still trying to get James over to Indian food. It's a no-go.
It would take a small miracle. It would take a small miracle. But no, like for me, just having the kinds of relationships, friendships with other guys where people can speak truth into your life. And that's a good thing. It's like well received. I think sometimes guys, we fear someone stepping on our toes. Right. We fear that we're going to get wounded or someone's going to offend us or that we're going to offend someone. But I want that kind of a relationship with someone where they can actually tell me what is true. And I receive that. I had a buddy not long ago, TJ, I was having breakfast with him and he said, "James," he goes, if there's anything about me that you know and that I need to hear, and like I find out about it 2 or 3 years from now, and you didn't tell me, I would be devastated.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that. It was like this sense of like, hey, if there's something about my character, if there's something about the way that I operate that and you never tell me, I just would be devastated. In other words, if you don't love me enough to speak the truth, man, that's not cool.
Right.
And so even as dudes, like we want people in our life to not just cheer us on or yuck it up with us,
sure,
but someone who's going to speak the truth to us and go, "Hey, you know that thing you do? Yeah, don't do that anymore." Like we need that, and more often than not, we push that away,
sure,
those voices away. And so we want to develop those within the context of our church. We want to serve together. Some about getting dudes together to be active and to sweat and to move,
sure,
and to work together is energizing for guys. Not I know everyone's different, but the vast majority of guys don't love showing up for a book study, that goes on for 52 weeks, and they have a lot of they're not going to do a Beth Moore study, a lot of guys just don't want it that way. But I tell you what, you get them together for a project, something to work on, to get their hands dirty, and you'll be surprised. I mean, guys, rise up to the challenge. They're inspired by movement. And then we talk about our guys. We want them to be engaged. We want them to engage people within the context of our local church body, but ultimately our community and in the world. And so when you talk about men's ministry for us in our context, that's typically what it looks like. We have studies and stuff where we meet with guys and we try to be intentional with them. But a lot of it is, at least for me, a lot of it is just stuff like this, is having conversations with guys and being intentional, consistent, and faithful.
What's interesting is, obviously, if you guys have not noticed by now, James is a pastor, and he is very articulate and is easy to speak. But I've dealt with a lot of pastors and also just men in ministry before. And just last week, I called a men's ministry. One, just to kind of encourage them and just talk with them and connect kind of thing. And he's like, you know what, man? He said, you're the only other men's ministry to do that. And he said, I always feel like it's, it's kind of lonely in the room sometimes, even though, I'm able to be reached by phone, text, email, whatever. He said, but, I feel like it's a little bit lonely sometimes. And this is a ministry that is, nationwide and pretty successful, one that we kind of look up to. And so it was interesting to hear that, pastors, even, men in general, you don't always, you may assume that they have a lot of friends, a lot of network, a lot of support, and they don't. Mm-hmm. So one of the reasons why we have started our charters in Uncommen was to get that kind of situation, that for guys that may not have a church they attend that, does ministry well, and are looking for a way to reconnect with God's word, because they don't need to attend the church, or they don't go to a small group in some fashion. Mm-hmm. I know in my small group, I have probably 50% of the group is already retired. I'm 50. I'm not retiring until probably about 750. So these guys, they've been through a lot more than me. So I look at them kind of like a mentor. And so I'm like always asking questions about that next place in my life. And so it's really good to, see guys connect even by a Zoom session or a phone call. It's important, I think, because, again, if you ever read that book, Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti, it's a great marriage study. Men get in those boxes. They have their money box, or their sex box, or their sports box, and even a nothing box. And
only for 20 minutes.
Exactly. That's why there's so many boxes, right? But when we're in that box, we're in that box. Whereas a woman, it's like a plate of spaghetti. You might start here, talking about like the garden, and then end up with, world peace. Yeah. In the same breath. So it's a great thing. But getting into our boxes, what we do well, and we tend not to look around and see other guys are in their boxes, and then we also long to have friendships. So
I think, one of the things that, as you were talking, TJ, that I was reminded of, and just talking about, someone who might be tuning in and watching this, or even listening to it, who maybe are not connected with a group of guys, or a local church body, or a small group, or whatever. Like, I mean, my encouragement is something that I find myself saying, and it's not original to me, but is that to celebrate, progress, not perfection. Mm-hmm. To know that we're not going to be perfect. And so I think, man, for the guy that's not connected, that spends 25, 30 minutes, even tuning into this and walking away with, something of value to apply to his life, or just to be challenged or encouraged, man, like kudos to that dude, man. Like celebrate that, celebrate those small wins. But man, it's just so important for guys, I think, to move toward community. Like, it's just how we're wired. It's how we're created. And yet it can be so challenging and so difficult for guys to do. But I've literally found myself sometimes sitting at a table of 8 to 10 guys, and like literally every guy around the table will lament the fact that they're not connected with other guys. So they'll tell their story, and the next guy will be like, yeah, man, like it's so hard. Like I can't get, and like you hear the story like 6, 7, 8, 9 times, and you're like, you want to introduce everyone. You want to be like,
the guy next to you.
I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but have you met the guy sitting next to you? Like, text them, like call, like grab breakfast, like go, play ball together. Like, dude. So my encouragement, I guess, would be to move toward that, to move toward community, to move toward relationships, because someone once said that leadership is lonely. Whether you're leading as a dad, you're leading as a husband, whether you're leading at work, man, it's hard and it's lonely. And sometimes you feel like your story is so unique and so different than everyone else's. And the lie that you tell yourself is, no one knows what it's like. No one knows what I'm going through. Like, this struggle, this issue, this is unique to me. Nah, probably not. Like there's probably some other dudes that would go, oh yeah, I've struggled with that too. Author C.S. Lewis once said that all great relationships begin when one guy says to another, you too? And I think that that's just so powerful. I think one of the strengths of something like this is you just hear other voices, and sometimes the things that are said, it just resonates with you. You go, oh, I've wrestled with that. I've thought that before.
Oh, sure.
And so it's just, I think that's encouraging and life-giving to dudes.
Yeah, because they think, I think people who are maybe outside the church have a problem with organized religion or whatever their viewpoint is, look at people inside the church and maybe like, I'm going to be judged if I go there. They think they're so perfect. And you realize that they may have some of those people, but I imagine that a true follower of Christ would realize that they do not have it all together. There's a reason why you needed a savior. And so if you could, get that guy to recognize that, yeah, we're all broken here, bro. The difference is we found a savior that repaired us, basically. And so let's come in and talk about all the struggles we share, those Me Too moments, and then help each other get to that next place. And that next place is the need of a savior. And so it's great to hear, that other, just men kind of recognize that, we have, quite a bit of a, following on social or email or just, charters in general. And so it's good to see guys planted around the world, that I'd say the average size of a small group is probably, 6 people kind of thing. You have some guys that are like 30 or 40, but they always break it down into like maybe 5-person segments to say, you're not going to share with 40 people as much as you're going to share with 5. And so,
I almost look at those groups as the special forces. There's always, it's easy sometimes for us to celebrate the infantry, seeing the thousands of troops. But I just think of, when I think of small groups, like a band of brothers like that, 6 guys, 8 guys, a dozen guys, where you're going, okay, I try to have the mindset, like we're special forces, man. We're going out and we're sharpening one another. We're there for one another. It's pretty powerful what God can do. So,
well, brother, I want to thank you for taking some time out today. I know I caught you probably between naps, and so between coffee.
I only work on Sundays, TJ. You know that. I'm a pastor.
I don't know that.
It's so hard for me not to take offering right now.
Great. Well, so guys, stay tuned. This interview is going to be going up into our membership section, along with other ones once a month. And I will put a link in this post so that you can visit James's church called Christ Point right here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so in the meantime, James and I will go have Thai food and think of you all. So James, thanks for your time, bro.
Likewise, TJ. Take care, brother.
All right, Uncommon. Have a great day, guys.